The sun had barely risen over the dusty stretch of Highway 340. A light breeze stirred the golden grass on either side of the road as the soft rumble of a classic engine echoed through the stillness. James Harris, 82 years old, rode his 1970 Harley-Davidson down the familiar route into town. The bike, weathered and loud, moved with surprising grace under his steady hands. For James, this was routine. Fill up at Marcus's gas station, grab some feed for the livestock, and head back before noon. But this morning was anything but routine. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed in his mirrors. James slowed to a gentle stop just past the gas station, resting one booted foot on the asphalt as the engine idled beneath him. A white cruiser pulled up behind him. 2 officers stepped out. Is this some kind of joke? Officer Ava Johnson, mid-20s, said under her breath as she removed her mirrored sunglasses. Her partner, Officer David Lopez, chuckled as he looked over the old man and his rusty motorcycle. License and registration, Johnson ordered sharply. And step off the bike, sir. James didn't move right away. He remained seated, both hands resting on the handlebars, his eyes calmly fixed on the road ahead. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just listened to the soft clicking of the cooling engine and the wind pushing gently across the open plain. I set off the bike, she repeated, her tone more forceful now. One hand dropped toward her belt, fingers brushing the handle of her sidearm. James slowly reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out a worn brown leather wallet. Without saying a word, he handed over his license and registration, neatly kept, clean, and current. Lopez raised an eyebrow. Man, this Harley's older than my dad, he joked, circling the bike with exaggerated curiosity. Looks like it should be in a museum. You really think it's safe for someone your age to be riding something like this? Johnson asked, inspecting the ID. 82? Seriously? James said nothing. His expression didn't change. Where are you headed, sir? She continued. Town, he replied calmly. One word. That was all. By now, a few cars had slowed. People inside the gas station were beginning to glance out the windows. Marcus, the station owner, stood frozen behind the counter, watching the interaction with growing unease. He recognized that bike immediately. Across the street, a woman pulled out her phone and started recording. You live alone? Lopez asked. Any family around? James remained silent. Johnson stepped closer, her frustration building. You know, sir, we're just looking out for your safety. You could hurt yourself or someone else riding this antique. Still, James didn't argue. His stillness was unnerving, like a stone unmoved by the wind. But something about the way he sat, the way his eyes scanned surroundings, not in fear, but with measured awareness, suggested there was far more to James Harris than anyone standing there could see. And soon, they would find out just how wrong they were. James Harris had always preferred silence over noise. While others filled their lives with chatter, James had mastered the quiet. On his small, weather-worn farm just 10 miles outside town, peace wasn't just a preference. It was a way of life. The property was simple. A faded white house with a sloping roof sat beside a large red barn. A John Deere tractor, partially disassembled, rested under a tree. The land stretched wide behind him, open, green, and still. He'd built this place himself, board by board, after retiring from the military. No family visited. No grandkids ran through the fields. Just him, his tools, and the land. Every morning, James woke up at 5 a.m., like he had for the past 40 years. He didn't need an alarm. Habit and discipline ran deep in his blood. He exercised, tended his livestock, drank 1 cup of black coffee, and reviewed the list of things to fix that day, usually machines. Always machines. James wasn't just a mechanic. He was an artist of motion and steel. At 11, he rebuilt a broken lawnmower engine with parts scavenged from a scrapyard. By 15, he was fixing boat motors at the docks after school. He didn't read manuals. He read sounds, rattles, hums, and vibrations told him more than any diagram ever could. The military spotted his talent early. He served in 3 wars over 4 decades, not as a frontline soldier, but as a man who made sure engines never failed when lives depended on them. He trained younger mechanics, led engineering teams, and was eventually promoted to colonel. But the honors and medals didn't matter now, because 10 years ago, during a mission training exercise, an engine failed on a Humvee convoy. James had flagged the issue month before. He filed reports. No one listened. When it failed, the brass needed someone to blame, and it wasn't going to be them. So they pointed the finger at Harris. He was quietly retired, told not to make noise, handed a generic letter and thanked for his service. No court-martial, no headlines, just silence, and James accepted that. Not because he agreed, but because arguing with systems too large to care only wastes breath. Now, he fixed tractors for farmers, helped young kids in town with their motorcycles, and sometimes took his old Harley into town just to feel the road under his wheels. The bike, a 1970 shovelhead, was louder than most cars on the road, and it still purred like a panther when tuned right. To most of the town, he was just an old man with a rusty bike. But Marcus at the gas station knew who he really was. A few older veterans at the diner remembered the name, and a few men on active duty, now captains and majors, still owed him everything. So when James Harris sat calmly beside his bike while two young officers questioned his right to ride, he wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He was simply patient, because experience doesn't panic. It waits, and sometimes it watches a storm come to it. By the time Officer Johnson started raising her voice, half a dozen people had gathered at the edge of the gas station. Some leaned against cars. Others clutched phones, recording. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "Isn't that James Harris?" someone whispered. "No way. The old guy with the Harley? He's out here every Tuesday." Across the street, Marcus had already stepped out from behind the counter. The gas station owner wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes narrowing as he recognized both the man and the situation unfolding. Meanwhile, Officer Lopez stood with arms crossed, shaking his head. His not responding. "Might be hearing issues," he said to Johnson in a low voice. "Maybe a little senile." Johnson rolled her eyes and stepped closer to James. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to come with us. We believe you're unfit to operate this vehicle safely." James remained motionless, the same calm resting in his eyes. "You have anything to say, sir?" she barked, hands on her hips. "I'm listening," James said quietly, finally breaking his silence. "Then answer the question. You don't think riding this motorcycle is irresponsible at your age?" James gave no reply. His gaze shifted, not toward her, but past her, to the slowly growing crowd now watching with furrowed brows and disapproving whispers. A teenager on his phone muttered, "These cops serious right now." "Hey, that guy's a vet," said another, recognizing the old man from Memorial Day parade years ago. Still, Johnson didn't hear them. All she saw was a stubborn old man giving her the silent treatment. "Sir, you're endangering yourself and others. I need you to step away from the motorcycle and come with us to the station for evaluation." James glanced at her, then slowly stepped off the Harley. The heavy engine ticked as it cooled, echoing into the tense silence. "What are we charging him with again?" Lopez whispered. "I'll figure that out later," Johnson replied. "Endangerment, mental evaluation, elder protection laws, whatever fits." "You sure we should?" "Lopez, just back me up." James didn't argue. He stood quietly, hands behind his back, like a soldier waiting for orders. But inside, a storm was building, an old kind of storm, the kind that had been trained to endure pressure, insults, even threats, but not humiliation. And this was public humiliation. Across the street, Marcus finally grabbed his phone. He dialed Fort Carson Military Base, barely pausing as a line rang. "Yes, this is Marcus Williams. Gas station on Highway 340. You've got a man named James Harris being detained by 2 local officers. You might want to check that name in your records." There was silence on the other end. Then, a voice replied with sudden urgency. "Did you say James Harris? So, do not let them move him. We're sending a response team immediately." Back on the roadside, Officer Johnson reached for her cuffs. And James Harris? He just looked at the horizon, quietly waiting, because deep down, he knew he wasn't alone. The quiet hum of late morning was shattered by a deep, distant rumble. Officer Johnson paused, cuffs in hand, as the sound grew louder. Engines. Not one or two, but a whole convoy. Lopez turned his head toward the horizon. What the hell is that? Down the two-lane highway, clouds of dust kicked into the sky. Then they appeared, 12 military Hums, tires clawing the pavement, headlights on, flying down the road in formation. A full convoy. Fast. Intentional. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised higher. Johnson stepped back from James, confused. What's going on? The hum screeched to a stop in a perfect semicircle around the scene. Doors flew open. Boots hit the ground. 50 soldiers in full uniform dismounted with precision and purpose. Their formation was flawless, years of training evident in every step. From the lead vehicle, a tall, broad-shouldered man emerged. His expression was unreadable, his stride brisk. Captain George Farrell, 55 years old, 22 years of active service, and one of Colonel James Harris's former trainees. Without acknowledging the officers, Farrell walked straight to Harris. He stopped 3 paces away and snapped a perfect salute. Colonel Harris, so. The words hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Silence fell. Johnson blinked. Colonel. Lopez's mouth went dry. Farrell turned his gaze on them, sharp, focused, and cutting. Which one of you initiated this stop? He demanded. Johnson took half a step forward, trying to gather herself. Officer Ava Johnson, City Patrol. We stopped Mr. Harris due to concerns about his safety on the road. Colonel Harris, Farrell corrected firmly. This man trained half of our force. He's a decorated veteran with 2 Bronze Stars, 4 Purple Hearts, and a Distinguished Service Cross. You stopped him because of his age. Johnson stammered. We didn't know. He didn't say. You didn't ask. Behind Farrell, the 50 soldiers took one synchronized step forward. The ground seemed to shake with the weight of it. The tone shifted. What had started as a public scolding of an old man had become a reckoning. Marcus crossed the street slowly, nodding at James with deep respect. Around them, the townspeople murmured in awe. Farrell turned back to Harris. Sir, are you all right? Do you require an escort or transport? Harris finally spoke, voice calm as always. No, Captain. Just came to town for spark plugs. Farrell allowed himself a slight smile. Understood. Johnson opened her mouth, but no words came. The weight of the mistake, of the assumption, pressed down like concrete. I'm sorry, Colonel Harris, she said quietly. I didn't know. Harris looked at her with the kind of patience only earned through years of service and sacrifice. Don't judge a man by the wrinkles on his face. Judge him by the roads he's walked. Farrell turned to his men. Formation. The soldiers stepped back in unison, clearing a corridor of honor between Harris and his Harley. He mounted the old bike, turned the ignition, and the engine roared to life. As he rode slowly between the rows of saluting soldiers, the town watched in stunned silence. It wasn't just respect. It was reverence. An hour after the last Humvee disappeared down the highway, the mood at the precinct was thick with tension. Sheriff Smith leaned back in his office chair, watching the video footage that had already gone viral. There was no denying it now. 2 of his officers had publicly humiliated a decorated war hero in front of the entire town, and now, the entire internet. The phone on his desk rang. Sheriff Smith, he answered, already knowing who it was. Captain George Farrell, Fort Carson, came the voice on the other end. We need to talk. The conversation was direct. No threats, no legal jargon, just the weight of institutional consequence. The military wasn't calling for punishment, not lawsuits, not suspensions, but they were demanding one thing, understanding. A man like Colonel Harris doesn't need revenge, Farrell had said. He needs to be treated like the legend he is, and so do the thousands of veterans just like him. Smith agreed. The very next morning, he called an emergency meeting at the precinct. Officers filled the room, some whispering, others uneasy. Johnson sat in the back, quiet, haunted by her own actions. She hadn't slept. Sheriff Smith didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Last week, two of our own disrespected a man who served his country longer than most of us have been alive. A man with more courage, more discipline, and more sacrifice in 1 year than most see in a lifetime. He looked at Johnson. A mistaken judgment, she said, standing up. A serious one. I assume because of age, because of appearances. But I've never felt smaller in uniform than I did when I found out who he was. The room stayed silent. Then Smith continued. Starting this week, we're launching a mandatory field training program. Every officer will spend time at Fort Carson. You'll see what real service looks like. Not in textbooks. Not in reports. In people. A few nodded. Johnson stepped outside after the meeting, taking a long breath. She still couldn't shake the moment Harris looked her in the eye, not with anger, but disappointment. That hurt more than any punishment. 3 days later, she drove down Highway 340 alone, off duty. She found a white farmhouse by a pasture, a tractor half disassembled near the barn, and an old Harley resting in the shade. Harris was under the tractor, tools scattered nearby. He slid out when she approached, wiping grease from his hands. Colonel Harris, she said gently. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. I came to apologize. Again. Not because I was ordered to. Because I needed to. He motioned toward the porch. Coffee's hot. Inside the quiet kitchen, Johnson sat across from him, nursing a ceramic mug. I became an officer to protect people, she said. But last week, I judged someone I should have saluted. Harris gave a small, thoughtful nod. You judge the book by its cover, he said. Most people do. The good ones, they learn not to.